Hey friends, welcome back. This is the last installment of our gender videos. Please check out the extra credit videos online. They are under content, under handouts. It is incredibly important for you to do extra credit this semester. Two videos that I've uploaded that are that pertain to our topics this week are Tough Guys and Misrepresentation. They're both great films. I highly suggest that you watch them even if you do not utilize them for extra credit. If you have another video you feel would fit any of the topics we've covered or this particular topic, please email me and we will see if it works for extra credit. If you are interested in watching it, I'm sure someone else is also interested in watching it and just may not have realized it. So we're going to look at the consequences of inequality. When we talk about some of the consequences of inequality, the first one that we're going to talk about is poverty. Then we are going to revisit self-worth and self-esteem, which we have talked about in media depictions and how prevalent eating disorders and self-harm is for young women, even in grades as low as 1 to 3, which is heartbreaking. And then we're going to talk about the continuum of violence in a second and looking at violence in and out of the home. So when we talk about poverty, we're going to look at how 30% of women who are head of households without a partner have income below the poverty line, which is astonishing, right? So when we look at poverty, we want to identify that poverty has a woman's face, that more than 1 in 7 women live in poverty. This was conducted in 2013. Poverty has grown since then. These numbers have risen since then. But we want to look at how much the intersectionality of gender and race and other minority systems or communities have on poverty. So now that we've been talking about the continuum of violence, let's really get to understand this. So when we talk about the continuum of violence, oppression is centered, right? So oppression and domination and exploitation centered. And then we see around this little circle, a little flower of these socially constructed systems like racism, sexism, ableism, anti-Semitism, autism, classism, heterosexism, ageism, all of these things, right, that influence the continuum of violence. Now we're going to look at the norms associated with those, right? Go back to this idea of what are the norms, right? Mores, folkways, and laws. And we can see how the folkways, mores, and laws get deeper in color. And in regards to sexual assault or sexual violence, right? Gender-based violence. We see that we have these hegemonic masculinity or androcentric practices. We have gender violence is normalized. We've talked about how that has been normalized in the media, in our vocabulary, in the way that we interact with others. We have sexualized media depictions, which we have looked at in previous segments. We've talked about very rigid gender roles. We've talked about how the language we use reinforces these cultural scripts, partly being within sexist jokes or the way that we talk about marginalized bodies and how we sexualize different marginalized bodies. Voyeurism, we really position women as something that we can consume, and we call this the male gaze within voyeurism, right? So we are constructed, our female-identified bodies are constructed for the purpose of the male gaze or for the entertainment or consumption by the male-identified body. Next, we'll see sexual harassment, which we're going to talk more about in a second. Sexual exploitation, we have over 72,000 people in slavery today. The largest portion of those people being in sex trafficking or sex exploitation. The next would then be starting to take action of flashing or harassment or insult, sexual insult or sexual violence, moving to rape, incest, statutory rape, child rape, date rape, marital rape, partner rape, and ending in murder. We're going to talk about intimate partner violence and the level of murder that is involved with gender-based violence. One of the first things that we want to talk about is femicide. So femicide is the ultimate form of violence against women and girls. It exists in every country and takes many forms. It is the extreme end point on the continuum of violence against women. Femicide occurs because the continuum of violence against women continues to be accepted, tolerated, and justified. Like all violence against women, the many causes of femicide are rooted in gender inequality, gender expectations, and systemic gender-based discrimination. We can also see how rape culture and femicide fit together so much. We've already talked about rape culture, and really rape culture, again, is systemic, and we can see the systematic ways that rape culture is carried out within media, within our language, rape jokes, things of that nature. So these are 2 videos that I've put up in the discussion board. I've provided more videos as well. You need to choose one of these videos to watch and comment on, and then obviously comment on at least 2 other people's videos. Make sure that when you are commenting on other people's videos, they are not your videos. It's not the same video that you have watched, nor is it commenting back on your own video. Okay, so queer bodies in the continuum of violence. So when we look at LGBTQIP plus bodies, we see 64% of transgender individuals have experienced sexual assault in their lifetime. Think about how 1 in 4 women will experience sexual assault in their lifetime. That's 25%. For trans bodies, it is 64%. Adults who identify as LGBT in the U.S., we have 3.4% of women, 3.6% of men, and 0.3% of people identify as trans. Think about the safety and consequences of being able to be out, right? So if only 0.3% of transgender identify as being queer, think about how much that relates to the safety and survival of these bodies when being visible in a society that continually attempts to erase your existence, how that affects your self-worth and self-identity. Age at time of first rape among female survivors, female identified bodies of the LGBTQIP plus community, 12% are under 11 years old, 30% are between 11 and 17, 37% are between 18 and 24, 14, 25 to 34, 5%, 35 to 44 and less than 2%, 44 years and older. Look at how age has really influenced the first time of a sexual assault. Now, please understand this is the first experience of sexual assault in their lifetime. We see the largest portions are between 11 and 24 years of age, where your prefrontal cortex is still developing, where your identity is still creating. It really sets the framework of how you will continue to move forward in life. So 1 in 4 male survivors experienced rape at the age of before or at 10. 1 in 5 transgender individuals have been homeless because of their gender identity. And then women who have been raped in their lifetime, 1 in 8, 13%, and 1 in 8 lesbians, 1 in 2 bisexuals, and 1 in 6 in heterosexuals. So that's 50% of people who identify as bisexuals have been raped in their lifetime. That's 50%. These are staggering numbers. So 55% of transgender individuals who tried to access homeless shelters were harassed, while 29% of them were turned away altogether. 22% of transgender individuals who access homeless shelters were sexually assaulted by residents or staff. I want us to be very clear that cisgender bodies and transgender bodies or queer bodies live a very different reality, which then goes back to this idea of witnessing and mindfulness. Even if you haven't experienced it, does not mean that it doesn't exist. And to be able to create spaces of empathy and kindness for individuals whose realities are based in an existence where their society actively works to eradicate their existence and to eradicate their communities is incredibly difficult to exist in. Okay, so this is anti-LGBT motivated homicides in the US. So we can see that there's a very large rise of individuals who have been, or incidences, 1 or more individuals who have been murdered at a time in regards to anti-LGBTQ motivated homicides, and I'll explain this graph a little bit more in the discussion. Let's talk about how educational spaces are unsafe and unwelcoming for the majority of LGBTQIP students. 65% have heard homophobic remarks. 30% have missed at least one day of school in the past month because they felt unsafe or uncomfortable. 85% were verbally harassed in the past year. So let's think about this idea of the myth of meritocracy and how everybody gets the same chances. Does everyone really get the same chances when systematic and systemic procedures are put in place to police and to eradicate certain people's existences? All right, so then domestic violence and intimate partner violence. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex people experience domestic violence at a similar rate to non-LGBTQ people, right? So generally it's between 1 in 3 and 1 in 4 people experience domestic violence. So we also see things such as crimes of honor, hate crimes, and then there's these videos that will also explore intimate violence. Okay, so if we think about the violence in and out of the home, we see that on average 84% of women experience street harassment annually, and more than 3,000 women at night stay in shelters to escape abuse. On average, every 6 days a woman in Canada, again, this femicide is not pertaining only to the US, but in this particular statistics, every 6 days a woman in Canada is killed by her intimate partner. We have very similar statistics in the US. The presence of a gun makes it 5 times more likely that domestic violence will turn into murder. And in the US, a woman is beaten every 9 seconds. So I want you again to think about the realities of people's existences. And I want you to think about how we all partake in the construction of our society, that these socially constructed systems exist and perpetuate because we buy into them. And then what is our accountability and how can we be allies for individuals who experience this reality on a daily basis? Make sure to check the discussion board. And if you have anything else in regards to gender that you want to bring up, please do put it on the discussion board or email me and I will introduce it. Thank you so much for spending this time to talk about gender and gender violence. Have a great day.